This is from Luke in Erquelinnes, Belgium. I think life has a way of surprising you in the smallest, strangest moments, like the day I accidentally changed my country's borders before lunch. It sounds impossible, but in my quiet little village, impossible things happen when you least expect them. It was an ordinary spring morning, the kind where the sky is a soft blue. The air smells faintly of damp grass, and you can hear birds over the hum of a distant tractor. My boots sank into the fresh soil as I checked the field, thinking only about getting my work done before the rain rolled in. I climbed into my tractor, ready for the usual routine. The seat was warm from the sun. The engine coughed once before settling into a steady rumble. I eased forward, and there it was, blocking my path. A large, flat-topped stone, sitting stubbornly right where I needed to go. It wasn't the first rock I'd ever moved. Around here, stones just turn up, as if the earth gets bored and spits them out. I leaned out of the cab, squinting at it. Big, heavy, but movable, I thought. Nothing about it seemed special. It was just in the way. I hopped down, the metal steps of the tractor clanging under my boots. The stone surface was cool and rough beneath my gloves, grains of dirt clinging to every crevice. I pushed, expecting resistance, but it slid surprisingly easily, scraping across the ground like it had been waiting centuries for someone to give it a nudge. When I stepped back, the path was clear. The field looked neater already, and I felt that quiet satisfaction that comes from solving a simple problem. No fuss, no drama, just one less thing in the way. I didn't know yet that I just redecorated Europe. Several days passed before I heard anything. Then word got around. A local history enthusiast had been walking the border and noticed something odd. The stone marker, an official piece of the 1820 Treaty of Kortrijk, wasn't where it should be, and I had moved it into France. You see, back in 1820, France and what was then the United Kingdom of the Netherlands signed the Treaty of Kortrijk to settle their border. As part of the deal, hundreds of stone markers were placed along the line. The one I moved had stood in the same spot for over 2 centuries until I came along with my tractor. Apparently, my little push had shifted the international border by about 7.5 feet, making Belgium slightly bigger and France slightly smaller. I'd unintentionally stolen a slice of France, the world's friendliest invasion, carried out with a tractor and good intentions. By the way, did you know there's a town called Barley, split between Belgium and the Netherlands, where the border runs through shops and cafes? You can move your chair a few inches and cross into another country. No passport, no fuss. Fact break time. There's also a village called Stansted Derby Line, straddling the border of Canada and the United States, where the public library literally sits in both countries. You can enter in Canada, pick out a book, and walk into the US, all without leaving the building. Now back to the story. Anyway, I didn't know whether to start writing an apology letter to an entire nation. Part of me wondered what would have happened if I pushed the stone the other way. Would I have shrunk Belgium instead? I pictured the headlines. Farmer expands France by accident. Either way, my neighbors would be shaking their heads over morning coffee, muttering, "Only Luke could pull this off." The news traveled faster than I thought for something involving an old rock. Soon, Belgian officials were calling French officials, probably expecting tense talks about maps and treaties. Instead, both sides laughed. One mayor joked we'd better not start another border war, while the other said, well, at least we gained good farmland. It was the most polite international incident. The truth is, no one wanted to fight over this. We weren't talking about cities, ports, or mountains. Just a sliver of grass, the size of a big vegetable garden. But still, the absurdity struck me. A treaty signed in 1820, upheld for over 2 centuries, and then casually undone by a farmer clearing his path before lunch. When the reporters showed up, their bright jackets looked out of place against the muted colors of the field. The wind kept flipping my hat brim as I tried to answer their questions. "Did you know you were moving the border?" one asked. I shrugged. If I'd known, I'd have worn nicer gloves. Another asked if I'd consider doing it again. I said, only if Belgium needs a bigger backyard. They asked what had been on my mind at the time. I told them the truth. No politics, no history, just the thought of finishing my work before the clouds rolled in. It's strange how the smallest choices, the ones you make without a second thought, can end up being the ones you tell stories about for the rest of your life. Of course, the conversation turned to restoring the original order. That meant putting the stone exactly where it had been since the Treaty of Kortrijk, a marker placed to prevent disputes between Belgium and France after Napoleon's defeat. I couldn't help but think, for over 200 years, it hadn't moved an inch, and I managed to shift it before breakfast. The locals had a field day with it, no pun intended. Some teased me, saying I should push the stone a few more meters, and see if we could get the bakery in the next village transferred into Belgium. Others joked about hiring me to move their fences for better sunlight. I laughed along, but I could tell the story would follow me for years. When the day came to put the stone back, the morning was damp, the grass heavy with dew. I brought the tractor again, not trusting my own strength to shift history twice in 1 month. The stone seemed to have settled into its new spot, as if it were sulking about being moved. But history is stubborn, and so are the people who protect it. I nudged it carefully, the tires leaving deep tracks in the soft ground. Slowly, we lined it up with the old maps and photographs, making sure it sat exactly where it had been for over 2 centuries. Watching it drop into place felt like returning something I borrowed, except the borrowed item was technically a piece of France. When it was done, the officials shook my hand, the reporters packed up, and the quiet returned to the village. The stone stood there, as it had for generations, pretending nothing had happened. But every time I drive past it now, I can't help but smile, because I know that for one brief moment, I accidentally changed the shape of a country. A week later, I was still hearing jokes in the market. The butcher asked if I could rearrange the border, so his shop fell into a country with lower taxes. The baker wanted me to shift things so she could claim her bread was international. I realized that in a small village, giving people something new to talk about was almost as valuable as bread itself. Even the school children got involved. One day, I walked past the playground and heard a boy telling another, "That's the man who stole France." I stopped to laugh, but the teacher waved at me with that smile that says, "Please don't encourage them." It felt strange and funny, being the star of a story I'd never meant to write. Not all the attention was playful, though. A few history buffs stopped by to thank me, not for the border shift, but for reminding people about the old Treaty of Kortrijk. Apparently, it's not every day you get villagers Googling a 200-year-old agreement because of a tractor mishap. I started looking at the border markers differently after that. Before, they were just silent stones scattered through farmland, half buried in grass. Now I noticed their careful placement, the dates etched faintly into their surfaces. I imagined the people who set them there, surveyors, soldiers, farmers, never guessing one would end up in the news centuries later. Some evenings, I'd stand by my marker, the one I'd moved, and just watch the light change over the fields. On one side, Belgium, on the other, France. No guards, no walls, just open land. It made me wonder how many borders exist only because we all agree to pretend they matter. Of course, I still work my fields like always. Life didn't change much, except now, every time I passed the stone, I gave it a little nod, like we shared a secret. And in a way, we did. For one brief week, that stone and I were co-conspirators in an international territorial adjustment. One evening at the pub, a friend raised his glass to me and said, "To Luke, the only man who can invade France with a tractor." The whole table burst out laughing. I took a sip and thought, well, at least it's a better nickname than the guy who hit the mayor's fence. It became clear the story wasn't going away. A tourist couple even stopped me once, asking if I could point out the famous stone. I showed them, and they took photos like it was the Eiffel Tower. I didn't have the heart to tell them it was just a rock in a field. Sometimes, I still wonder how many people have driven past that spot, completely unaware that they're looking at a place where history, bent a little, then straightened again. It's a small thing, but it's mine, and that makes the memory feel heavier and lighter all at once. Thanks for listening to my story. If you'd been in my boots, would you have pushed the stone or left it where it was? Let me know in the comments. And if you enjoyed this little border story, consider subscribing for more stories.